pilot called the cops on a 12-year-old boy at the airport, but had no idea who his father was. Jalen Porter had been staring at airplanes since before he could walk. At first, it was the sound. The low, powerful roar of engines overhead always made him stop whatever he was doing, point to the sky, and whisper, "Plane." Now, at 12, it wasn't just the sound. It was everything. The shape of the wings, the markings on the tail, the slow, graceful turn as they taxied toward the runway. He didn't just love planes. He studied them. That afternoon at Dallas-Fort Worth International, his mom was running behind. She always gave them extra time at the airport, just in case. But after a long wait in TSA and a quick snack stop, she let him sit by the windows near gate B19 while she grabbed a phone charger from a nearby vending kiosk. Jalen sat with his notebook balanced on his knees. It was worn, the cover bent at the corners, and every page inside filled with tiny handwriting and diagrams. Landing gear, flap positions, model comparisons. He was watching a Delta 737 being loaded. Fuel trucks buzzed below. A worker motioned with orange wands. Jalen copied the hand signals, quietly mouthing what he thought they meant. To anyone passing by, he was just a quiet kid sitting alone, head down, sketching. But to him, this was school. It was magic. A woman in a navy blue pilot's uniform stood nearby, checking her watch. Her name tag read CPT M. Langford. She was sipping black coffee, tired, waiting on crew clearance. Her next flight was running late, something about a maintenance check. Her eyes scanned the gate. Then she noticed him. He was black, sitting alone, close to the window, writing things down. And every now and then, he looked up toward the plane. She watched him for maybe 10 seconds, then shifted uncomfortably. In her mind, something about it didn't sit right. Why wasn't he with anyone? What was he writing? Why did he keep looking at the plane? Her fingers tightened around her phone. She hesitated, then dialed. "Airport security, this is Captain Langford, flight 2294. I just noticed a young male, possibly early teens, alone by the window near gate B19. He's been staring at the aircraft, writing things down. Something feels off." The voice on the other end asked for a description. She gave one. Jalen looked up and saw two uniformed officers walking his way, but he didn't flinch. He didn't know he was the reason they were coming. His mom had just returned with a charger in hand, still digging through her bag for a receipt. She barely had time to process what was happening before one of the officers stepped between her and her son. "Ma'am, we need to ask your son a few questions." "About what?" she asked, confused. "He's just sitting here." Jalen blinked up at them. "Did I do something wrong?" The officer didn't answer that. He just motioned for Jalen to stand. And that's when people around them started pulling out their phones. But this was only the beginning, and things were about to get a lot louder. Jalen stood slowly, confused but calm. His notebook slipped off his lap and hit the floor with a soft thud. One of the officers picked it up, flipping through the pages like it might hold state secrets. Sketches of aircraft, diagrams of engine parts, pages filled with carefully labeled notes in neat handwriting. His mother, Tasha Porter, stepped forward fast. "Excuse me, what's going on?" Her voice was firm now, sharp with concern. "We received a report of suspicious activity near the gate," one of the officers said, "just doing a routine check." "Suspicious?" she repeated. "You're talking about a 12-year-old boy with a notebook." The other officer, a younger one, seemed hesitant. He glanced at Jalen, then back at his partner. "We're not accusing him of anything," the older officer said. "We just need to make sure everything's okay." Jalen opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His throat was dry. He didn't even know what he was supposed to say. His heart thudded in his chest, not out of guilt, but because suddenly all eyes were on him. People were staring, phones were recording. One woman nearby had already whispered, "What happened?" to the man next to her. Captain Langford watched from a distance. She didn't come closer. She didn't speak. She just stood near the gate counter, arms crossed, coffee in hand, watching. Tasha reached for Jalen's hand. "My son loves airplanes. He wants to be a pilot. That's all he's doing. Watching planes and writing in his notebook. Since when is that a crime?" The officer hesitated. "Like I said, ma'am, we're just following up. Someone..." "Who?" Tasha snapped. "Who said he looked suspicious?" The older officer didn't answer. Jalen looked up at his mom, and then over at the window, where the Delta 737 sat quietly, oblivious to the chaos unfolding. A crowd had formed now. Not huge, but enough. A few bystanders stood closer, their phones out, quietly filming. Someone whispered, "This is ridiculous." "Can I see the notebook?" the younger officer asked. Jalen handed it over, and the officer flipped through it carefully this time, slower, realizing what he was holding. He paused on a page that listed airplane models by name, with small notes like 737, short haul, single aisle, A350, long haul, composite materials, ERJ, regional jet, 76 seats. His eyes softened, and he turned to his partner. "He's literally studying planes." The older officer sighed. "Okay, you're free to go." Jalen stepped back, closer to his mom. She pulled him in, placing a hand on his back. Her voice trembled now. "You should be ashamed." Neither officer responded. They just walked away. The crowd stayed for a few seconds longer, processing what had happened, then slowly began to disperse, but the phones were still up. Someone nearby murmured, "He was just a kid, man." Back near the gate counter, Captain Langford quietly pulled out her phone again and typed something into her notes app. She looked at the boy, the mom, the way people looked at her now, and for the first time a flicker of doubt crossed her face. But it wouldn't stay a flicker for long, because a stranger had recorded everything, and the internet was about to find out. The video hit social media less than an hour later. Shot from behind a column near gate B19, the footage wasn't shaky or blurry. It was clear. You could see Jalen sitting alone, sketching. You could see the officers walking toward him. You could hear his mother's voice, calm at first, then rising with every word. "I told you, he's just a child." The caption read, "DFW Airport. This young black kid was sketching planes. A pilot called the cops on him. This is what happened." It didn't take long. By the time Tasha and Jalen were boarding their flight 2 gates down, the clip had already been shared over 2,000 times. By the time the plane touched down in Phoenix, it had crossed 50,000 views. By the next morning, it was trending on Twitter. Somewhere in a hotel room outside of Albuquerque, Captain Meredith Langford stared at her phone in disbelief. She recognized herself instantly, standing by the gate, arms crossed, coffee in hand, silent, watching. There was no audio of her call to security. No video of the conversation she'd had with dispatch, but it didn't matter. The internet filled in the blanks. Pilot racially profiles a kid at the airport. This is why black families have to give their kids the talk. Imagine calling the cops on a child with a dream. Comment after comment, post after post. Her inbox was full. The airline's media team was already scrambling to draft a statement. Someone from HR called her twice before noon. Her name wasn't mentioned in the video, but it wouldn't be long before someone figured it out. She shut off her phone and sat in silence, staring out the hotel window. Meanwhile, Jalen was quiet on the ride from the Phoenix airport to their hotel. He didn't say much at dinner either. He just stirred his mashed potatoes around and kept looking out the window, even though it was dark. Tasha leaned in. "Talk to me." Jalen shrugged. "I don't get it. I wasn't doing anything." "I know," she said. "You didn't do a single thing wrong." "But why did she call the cops on me?" Tasha exhaled slowly. She didn't have a perfect answer. Some people see what they want to see, not what's really there. Jalen looked down. "Maybe I shouldn't write in my notebook at the airport anymore." "No," she said more firmly this time. "Don't ever stop doing what you love because someone else can't see past their fear. Your dream doesn't shrink just because someone's vision is small." Jalen didn't say anything, but he nodded. By the next morning, journalists were emailing her. Local news, then national. She ignored most of them, but one message stood out. Subject line, "We'd like to speak with your son." It was from the National Black Aviation Society, inviting Jalen to their youth mentorship program and offering to send him a flight simulator. Jalen's eyes lit up for the first time since the incident. "Are they serious?" "They sure are," Tasha said, smiling. "People saw you. They heard you." Jalen sat up straighter. "Maybe I could really do this." She nodded. "You already are." Back in Albuquerque, Meredith sat in the corner of the crew lounge, staring at the floor. No one said much to her, but she felt the weight of their eyes. Someone had printed out a screenshot from the video and left it on the break room counter. No note, just a message. But as bad as that felt, she had no idea the next headline was about to turn everything upside down. By day 3, the story wasn't just viral, it was everywhere. Cable news, podcasts, morning talk shows. Everyone had a take. Some hosts said it was a wake-up call, others dismissed it as overblown. But one thing was clear, people were watching. The video had passed 3.4 million views. The hashtag #LetJalenDream started trending. A local teacher tweeted that her entire 6th grade class wanted to write letters to him. A retired pilot offered to take him on a private tour of a hangar in Tucson, and people kept asking, who was the pilot? The airline hadn't released her name, but the internet did what it always does. Someone dug up old flight rosters, matched dates and flight numbers, and within hours, Reddit threads were circulating screenshots. Captain Meredith Langford, commercial pilot, 30 years in the air. Now she was the headline. One blog called her the face of outdated prejudice in the cockpit. Another titled their article, From Pilot to Pariah, When Bias Hits Altitude. She barely left her hotel room. She canceled her next 3 flights, citing personal reasons. Every time her phone lit up, she felt sick. Every notification, every alert, it was all too much. The pressure wasn't just public. It was coming from inside the airline now, too. An internal review had been launched. She was asked to complete an implicit bias training course, and then quietly, she was placed on leave. She didn't tell anyone right away, not her sister, not her father, definitely not the coworkers texting her to say hang in there. But what really kept her up that night wasn't the comments, or the memes, or even the possibility that she'd lose her job. It was the fact that she hadn't even asked the boy what he was doing, not once. She hadn't walked over, hadn't looked at the notebook, hadn't said, "Hey, are you okay?" She just saw him and called. She stared at the ceiling in the dark, mouth dry, brain spinning. Across the country, in Phoenix, Jalen sat on his bed in his hotel room, legs crossed, watching a YouTube video on his tablet. It was someone breaking down the whole situation, showing the clip, pausing frame by frame. This moment right here, the creator said, circling the screen, is when he realizes they're talking to him. Jalen didn't say anything, but Tasha, sitting on the other bed, noticed his shoulders tense. "You don't have to watch that," she said. "I know," he replied. I still don't get it. Why was I suspicious? Because I was alone? Because I had a notebook?" Tasha hesitated. "You were curious. You were learning. That made you stand out. Some people don't know how to handle that. They assume the worst." Jalen looked at her. "You think she feels bad?" Tasha looked back. "I think she's being forced to look at herself, and that's not always easy." He nodded quietly. Then her phone vibrated. A news alert. She clicked it, scanned it, then read the headline twice before showing Jalen. His eyes widened as he read it out loud. "Breaking. White House announces retired Air Force Colonel Dr. Emery Porter as new FAA administrator." Jalen blinked. "Wait, that's Dad." Tasha's phone lit up again, this time a call. It was Emery. "Hey," she answered. "We just saw." Jalen leaned in, eyes bright. Emery's voice was calm, deep, always steady. "I didn't want you to find out through a news blast. The official ceremony's next week. I told them I wouldn't accept unless you two were there." Jalen grinned. "You're going to be in charge of the FAA?" "Yeah, son," Emery chuckled. "Guess I finally made it." But neither of them knew, yet, that the woman who called security on Jalen was about to realize exactly who his father was. The FAA's announcement ceremony was held in Washington, D.C., a week later. It wasn't flashy. No confetti, no dramatic music, just a well-dressed crowd, government officials, and the press packed into a clean room with a polished stage. The new administrator stepped forward in a crisp charcoal suit, steady as ever. "Please welcome Dr. Emery Porter, our newly appointed administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration." Polite applause filled the room as Emery approached the podium. He didn't smile much, he never had. But when he glanced at the front row and saw Jalen, sitting tall in his button-up shirt and navy blue tie, his expression softened. He began with the usual, thanking the president, outlining goals, talking about safety and modernization. But then he paused. "There's one thing I didn't expect to say today," he said, his voice steady. A week ago, my son was stopped at an airport while watching planes and writing in his notebook. A pilot saw him and assumed the worst. You could hear the room shift. Journalists glanced at each other, heads tilted. He wasn't breaking a rule. He wasn't bothering anyone. He was doing what I did when I was his age, paying attention, dreaming. Jalen lowered his eyes but smiled, just a little. I don't bring this up for sympathy. I bring it up because this moment, right now, is proof that the same boy who was once treated like a threat is the same boy sitting in the front row as I take this position. And that matters. Someone in the back clapped, then another. The applause grew slowly. It wasn't for drama. It was respect. Back at her home in Amarillo, Meredith Langford watched the speech on a muted TV, frozen in place. She hadn't planned to tune in, but the headline had caught her eye. FAA Administrator named. She nearly dropped her mug when she saw the name. Dr. Emery Porter. She stared at the screen, blinking. Then the live footage cut to a shot of him at the podium, right as he said it. A pilot saw him and assumed the worst. Meredith sat down hard on the edge of her couch. Her chest tightened. That boy, that mom, that day. It wasn't just any kid. It was the son of the man now leading the very organization that governed every inch of airspace she'd flown through for 3 decades. Her phone buzzed with a text from a fellow pilot. Guess you saw the news. That kid, FAA kid, oof. Another message followed. PR's drafting something. You may want to get ahead of it. She rubbed her face, thought about calling her union rep, thought about packing a bag, thought about quitting, if she was being honest. But something else cut through the noise. Guilt. Not just the kind that creeps up when you get caught, the kind that settles when you realize you never even looked at him. You never asked a single question. You saw a threat, not a child. She opened her laptop, searched the name. Jalen Porter. Up came the articles, the clips, the photos of him smiling shyly next to a model aircraft, the ones of him sitting beside his dad at the announcement, then one of him holding that notebook like it was a trophy. She leaned back, staring at the screen. A 12-year-old boy with big dreams, and now a father with power. But the real question wasn't what happened. It was what she'd do now that she knew. The email was short. Subject, request for a meeting from Meredith Langford to Office of the FAA Administrator. I don't expect a reply, she wrote, but if Administrator Porter is willing, I'd like to speak with him, one-on-one. She left it at that. No excuses, no backstory, just a request. 3 days later, her phone rang. This is Evelyn from Dr. Porter's office, the voice said. He agreed to meet. The location wasn't official. No press, no cameras, just a quiet room inside a regional FAA office near Oklahoma City. Meredith drove there alone. No uniform, no badge, just a plain black blazer, a legal pad, and hands that wouldn't stop shaking on the steering wheel. She arrived early, sat in the car for 15 minutes before walking in. Dr. Emery Porter was already waiting. He stood when she entered, didn't offer his hand, didn't offer a smile, just a nod. Meredith cleared her throat. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Emery sat back down. You have 15 minutes. She sat. The silence between them stretched. I didn't know who he was, she began. Not that it changes anything. I didn't even speak to him. I saw a kid sitting alone, taking notes by the gate, and I assumed something was wrong. Emery didn't respond. He just watched her. I've been flying for 30 years, she said. Thousands of hours in the air. I always thought I was fair. Thought I didn't carry anything extra into the cockpit. She looked down. But I did. I did that day. Still, Emery said nothing. Meredith leaned forward. I didn't come here for sympathy. I came because I owe your son an apology. And you too. I saw something that wasn't there. And I know how many times that happens to kids like him, how often that could end a life or a future. She looked him in the eyes for the first time. He deserves to fly one day, and I won't be the reason he's afraid to. Finally, Emery spoke. You're not the first pilot to call in something that didn't feel right. His voice was even, measured. But the reason we're here isn't because you made a call. It's because you didn't question your own assumption. You didn't ask. You didn't wonder. You just pointed. Meredith nodded, barely. He continued, I've worked my whole life to get here, and I've tried to shield my son from the noise that follows people who look like him, But last week, it found him anyway. He paused. I don't need your apology, he said, but Jalen deserves to hear it. When you're ready. She swallowed hard. I will. He stood. That's all? She stood too. Thank you for your time. As she left the room, she didn't feel lighter. There was no relief, no clean resolution, but there was direction. Later that month, Jalen received a letter in the mail, handwritten, 1 page. It didn't try to explain away the moment. It just said, I saw you wrong. I won't make that mistake again. Signed, Meredith Langford. Jalen held it for a long time. He didn't smile. He didn't tear up. He just handed it to his mom and said, I think she meant it. Tasha looked at him. What do you want to do with it? Jalen thought for a second. I'm keeping it, he said, but I'm still flying. Because in the end, the story wasn't about a mistake. It was about what you do after it. Stories like Jalen's don't always make the news. Sometimes they end quietly, without cameras, without apologies. But this time, the world was watching. This time, the truth had a witness. Actually, millions of them. Jalen didn't ask to be part of a national conversation. He just wanted to study planes, the same way his father once did, the same way thousands of kids do every single day. But one person's fear almost turned his passion into a problem. And that's the truth we have to sit with. It's not always violence that does the damage. Sometimes it's the quiet, ordinary choices. The decision to call, the decision not to ask, the decision to believe the worst of someone without a word exchanged. Jalen's story didn't end at gate B19. It didn't end when the officers walked away or when the cameras turned off. It continued when he chose to keep dreaming. And the woman who made the call, her life didn't stop either. But it changed. Because once you're faced with the weight of your assumptions, you can't unsee them. So here's the lesson. Before you assume, ask. Before you fear, look closer. Before you act, pause. Not every kid gets a second chance to be seen the right way. Let's do better with the first one. If this story moved you, share it. Not just online, but in real conversations with your friends, your family, your coworkers. Challenge the way we see one another. Help build a world where kids like Jalen don't have to prove they belong in spaces they already love.